Hamlet. In Houston, Texas, Taymon is a member of the ROTC and asks, quote, will the U.S. military focus on more humanitarian efforts to alleviate the harm caused by COVID? If so, how? Taymon, I'm going to turn your question over to the highest-ranking uniformed member of the Armed Forces to answer, the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley.
Well, it's a great question, Taymon, and thanks for that. As you know, with respect to COVID, for the U.S. military, our priority is first to protect the force. And the reason we put that first is because our theory of the case is that if the force is not healthy, then we can't do all the other tasks like protect the American people, either internationally or domestically. So the first thing we have to do is to make sure that our force itself, the troops, the ships, the planes, and those that man them are clean, COVID-free. So the Secretary has instituted a whole series of very, very rigorous rule sets that we've been following now for several months. And thankfully, we've been, and I knock on wood every day, but thankfully we've maintained that discipline, and we have, relative to other parts of the society in the world, we have relatively low rates of infection. So we've learned a lot over the last several months, but we've got to protect the force. Secondly, we've got to protect the readiness, because our #1 mission is to protect the Constitution, protect the country from any enemies, foreign and domestic sort of thing. So that's the primary role of the U.S. military. So maintaining the readiness of the force is key, and that includes the health of the force. And then lastly, we're going to work as part of and in support of a whole-of-government approach. So right now, as many know, we, the Department of Defense, are in support of other agencies in combating this scourge of the COVID-19 virus. We've been very effective at it. We've been greatly in support with our ships, the Comfort, for example. Our doctors and nurses, our hospitals, et cetera, have been deployed all over the United States and internationally. So we'll continue to do that in support of other agencies. So the force protection piece is critical. The readiness piece is critical. And then lastly, we're in support of the other agencies. And we're going to continue to do that as we have been, and we'll do that under the direction of the Secretary of Defense. So thanks for the question, Timon.
The third question comes from Peter Hu from Alabama. Peter asks, sir, do you believe the integrity of the colonel's promotion selection process and being close hold was compromised politically and by the media? I'll turn this question over to Dr. Esper.
No, thank you. It's a good question. Look, I believe in the integrity of all of our promotion processes, regardless of rank. We apply stringent standards, of course, to this to ensure its integrity. But we also follow all applicable laws and regulations, policies, and practice and precedent. So I'm very confident in the integrity of our board processes. We protect the privacy of individuals, and we go to great extent to make sure it's fair and it's sound, and the processes can hold up the scrutiny of any type of inquiry or any type of look in terms of how the process is conducted. So I think everybody out there who's being looked at now for promotion or who's gone through a board should have full faith and confidence that the chain of command, military and civilian, will ensure and upkeep the integrity of that process. That's what we owe our service members.
Thank you, sir. Given the events of 2020 and the Secretary's charge to the Department on diversity, we solicited video messages from the force so we could hear from you directly. This first story and question is from Senior Airman Naomi Sims of the U.S. Air Force. Let's roll the video.
Hello, my name is Senior Airman Naomi Sims of the 177th Fighter Wing in New Jersey. I was recently in a meeting where my leadership acknowledged the importance of addressing some of the social issues we're all experiencing. They opened the floor for conversation and feedback, but there was very little participation in that setting. I actually did have ideas, suggestions, and even some critical feedback to improve things around the unit, but I remained silent and frustrated. After sharing my frustration with an entrusted chief, I was encouraged to go as far as to speak with the command chief of our wing. In my personal experience as a Black woman in the Air Force, I have felt the pressure to conform and not cause any waves surrounding the subject of race, so I was undeniably nervous to share my perspectives and ideas with leadership. However, I am proud to report that my leaders were incredibly receptive and open to my feedback. Those conversations sparked a lot of much-needed dialogue about topics that people so often shy away from. Being given the space to understand and be understood was extremely impactful for me, and I feel that others would benefit from it as well. With that being said, does the military have any plans to facilitate more opportunities for productive and informative dialogue around other bases?
Mr. Secretary, your thoughts on her comments?
Oh, it's a great insights, great comments. I thank her for sharing them. She's spot on. I got to tell you, over the past 3 weeks, I've held well over half dozen listening sessions all around the country and overseas with soldiers and sailors and airmen of all ranks and of all races and ethnicities. And the SEAC has joined me on many of those. In fact, we just held one yesterday at a naval facility down in Virginia. And what she is saying is the same story we hear over and over and over again, and that is the importance of having that conversation and the difficulty in initiating it. And I know the SEAC and I have both taken this same note over and over again, which is why in that first action memo that we put out last week, one of the things that I wrote in there is the importance of giving our folks the lexicon, the words, the definitions to start talking about things like discrimination and racism and prejudice, get people comfortable with the terms, and then help teach practices, whether it ranges from interventions to having the conversation, because they're very difficult conversations. We've sat in them. I've sat in them now several times with well over 100 service members and had these. And what she is saying is spot on. I think once you get in a group and you can get over that initial reluctance to have that conversation, people really start talking, and you get great insights into their experiences, their perceptions, and that's where it has to happen. That's where it begins, where you really start breaking down the problem and getting, not just sharing experiences, but then getting towards solutions. So we've put some of this in the memo, the action memo coming out. I've put out word to commanders, to leaders of all grade and all the services that you got to have these conversations, you got to facilitate them, and you just got to be able to have that discussion. People want to talk, and we got to be able to listen as well. So I hope this is something that commanders not only hope but should do across the force. I'm glad that she raised it, and it's because it's very important. That's where it has to begin, at that level, to begin those discussions, and then we got to facilitate it from the top down as well, so that we open up that space for folks to have that discussion. If you don't mind, I'll invite the SEAC, because he's been my battle buddy, if you will, on this journey, and see what he wants to share.
No, thank you, Mr. Secretary. So first of all, teammate, thank you so much for bringing that up to us, because like the Secretary said, this is something that has been common throughout our travels. The one thing that I have learned from all of this so far is that adversity continues to bring opportunity, and this is yet another opportunity for us to get our wrongs right. Conforming is not the way for anyone out there serving in the Department of Defense. We should all be valued for what we bring to the table. But in order to do this, we have to talk about it more and more. And I will say that the more we talk to the troops, the more comfortable we are addressing the issue. It's coming natural, but repetition is going to be your champion. You have to be able to put it out there, be transparent, and go ahead and continue the conversation up and down the chain to be able to get after the root causes of the problem. And then that's going to lead to the most important thing that we can do on this, and that is to measure our progress. Then we're going to go ahead and start looking at the facts and the data to make sure that we're marching in the right direction. But it takes people like you, courageous enough to voice your opinions, your concerns to your leaders, and then walk the rounds up to the target, up the chain, to ensure that your voice is heard. You do that, we have your back 100%.
Let me just wrap up by saying this is about two important things. One is showing empathy and respect for one another. And then number two, related to that, is what we're trying to do is build a more cohesive, a more capable, a more ready force. At the end of the day, we get there by working with our most critical resource, our people, and making sure that everybody feels included, and making sure everybody feels welcome and comfortable and confident in what they're doing, and ensuring that diversity, inclusion, and equal opportunity, because that's how we become even better than what we are today.
Courageous indeed. Thank you, sir. This next question comes from Matthew Kirshner, an Army automotive maintenance warrant officer from Junction City, Kansas. Via Facebook, he asked, what's the annual cost and actual benefits to prove to foreign nations that we can deploy brigades rapidly? Instead of wasting funds on brigade rotations costing hundreds of millions annually in taxpayer dollars just to ship equipment, not to mention personnel, repair parts, ammunition, etc., Why don't we use that funding to actually fix our readiness? Because units are flat out lying to the JCS in order to make a mission happen just to get a good evaluation bullet. Modernize our equipment sets. Last I checked, I was still working on equipment nearly 40 years old with issues 4 pages long. Matthew, I'm going to turn your question over directly to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to answer. Sir, your thoughts?
Well, thanks, Matthew, for the comment. I'm gonna give you a call, though. I want to find out the equipment that's 40 years old. I got 40 years in the military. I'm hoping you're not working on stuff 40 years old if you're in the Army. There's ships out there that are 40 years old. There's airplanes, but I'm going to give Matthew a quick call here. I want to find out about that equipment. But having said that, there is a logic to why we do what we do in terms of rotating forces. And we do. We rotate brigades to Korea, for example. We rotate brigades to Europe. And we've got to be able to do both. We've got to be able to fix and maintain our equipment here at home station or overseas. But we also have to project power. The United States is a unique global power in that we have a friendly country to our north and our south, and we have oceans to our east and our west. And for us to be a global power and influence outcomes around the world and to shape outcomes in the interest of the United States, we've got to be able to project power. So that's why we do it. And in order to do that, we have to rotate forces on a very, very frequent basis in order to stretch out the muscle memory, if you will, of the sea and air lift to get forces, heavy forces or light forces across the oceans and overseas and get them into exercises and training and so on. Yes, we have been doing that now for 20 years on a scheduled basis or so into Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere. But it's one of those things that if you don't continually practice it and train at it, then it will atrophy over time, and it doesn't take long for that to atrophy. So we need to continue rotations forward in order to fulfill the tenets of the National Defense Strategy in order to maintain our commitments overseas. And at the same time, we need to maintain all that equipment. And Matthew, I'll give you a call here. I want to find out about the 40-year-old equipment that you're working on. And then maybe I can do something with the Secretary of Defense and get you some new equipment. But thanks for the question. Great question.
Look out, Matthew. Our sixth question today comes from Salvatore Corelli of Stamford, Connecticut. He asks, how did the United States fall so far behind Russia and China in terms of nuclear modernization and hypersonic technology? Mr. Secretary, would you care to answer this question on nuclear readiness?
Sure, and I appreciate Salvatore's question. Let me just, though, challenge the premise up front. I can assure Salvatore that we have the most ready, capable forces out there, bar none. And the fact is we are upgrading them and modernizing our bomber force, our ICBM force, and our submarine force. And they will not just be more capable than our competitors and adversaries today. They will be even more capable than that as we modernize them. So, and there's more to it than that. We have to also update and modernize our nuclear command and control and communications. But we are putting a lot of money into this. It's important to continue to modernize and recapitalize the nuclear deterrent because of what it is. That second word I mentioned, deterrent. Because what it does, if you have a very capable triad, you're able to deter conflict. You'll be able to deter threats to the United States. And at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. We want to deter conflict. We want to deter war. And failing that, we want to be prepared to fight and win. But I can assure Salvatore and anybody else there that's interested in this issue is we maintain a highly capable nuclear triad, more capable than our adversaries and competitors. And we will continue to maintain that overmatch in the years ahead.
Next, we have another video message. This one is from Lance Corporal Pham from Des Moines, Iowa. Just as a reminder, like our questions, these are real videos from around the force. In this one, there's a lot of background noise, and in true Marine fashion, it sounds like there's heavy armor rolling through at one point. So to make it easier for our online audience to follow along, we've added subtitles. Otherwise, it's just as she submitted it. Let's roll it.
This is Lance Corporal Pham from Des Moines, Iowa. I'm here to tell you about my experiences regarding inclusion and diversity in the Marine Corps. 2 years ago, before I signed the papers, I was encouraged not to join by other service members and veterans because of my background as a female and a minority. I was told that I'd be attacked from both angles because of this. However, I accepted the risk and joined anyway, and upon coming to this unit, I was proven wrong. I was welcomed with open arms by people of all sorts of backgrounds regarding race, religion, ethnicity, culture. It did not matter. We're all bonded by the same standards and same willingness to perform our duties. However, other service members might not have had the same luck I've had with this wonderful group of brothers and sisters and good leadership who enforce inclusion. They might feel hindered or disrespected because of their backgrounds. I plan on progressing my career in order to trample exclusion and encourage inclusion. I appreciate this opportunity as one to encourage those who feel that they can't choose their own career or path because of their backgrounds, to accept the risk and go for it anyway, because the Corps, along with the rest of the world, is moving towards the path of inclusion and diversity, making progression, and anybody can be a part of that movement. Thank you.
SEAC Colón-López, do you want to comment on Lance Corporal Pham's message?
Absolutely. I mean, things like that just get you motivated every time. So I want to thank the Lance Corporal for her courage and ownership of the issue, first of all. This is somebody that I can assimilate with because I too am a minority, and I was told about my limitations before I even tried to do anything. And it was all about proving people wrong, but that took action. When we look at minorities progressing to the ranks, we need to make sure that everyone has the same opportunities, regardless of who they are. And then if they excel, then so be it, open the door. And if they don't, provide them either the training or another opportunity to go ahead and move forward or validate their limitations. But I will tell you that she is doing exactly what every single member of the Department of Defense should be doing, trampling diversity and inclusion, or promoting it. And diversity and inclusion are nothing more than a quality control mechanism for us, the Department of Defense, to benefit from the talents of everyone in our rank and file. So we need to embrace that. So for everyone listening right now, I believe that Lance Corporal Pham just gave you a vector. Dust off your map and compass and start marching on.
All right. The next question comes from Rosemary Helton, who works for the Pentagon Force Protection Agency. She asked, quote, with the pending memo on OPSEC and CUI, how do you see it impacting not only DOD, but the federal government as a whole? Mr. Chairman, sir, your views on operational security and controlled unclassified information.
I'm sorry, I need to jump in here before the chairman answers because
I was just about to jump on that.
I just want to commend Rosemary for her fine choice of sports teams, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know it's a very astute question. I'm sure the...
I think since the Secretary wrote the memo, the Secretary can continue with the answer to the question, since it's from the Pittsburgh Steelers. But Rosemary, thanks. Thanks for the question. And I will let the Secretary answer the question. But from my point of view, operational security is critical, and it always has been, always will be. And no matter what labels we put on it, whether it's classified, CUI, FOUO, secret, top secret, all these code words, et cetera, the couple of things to remember about operational security. One is whoever you're talking to with information, they need to have the appropriate level of clearance. Don't ever forget that. So you might be talking to someone about something. They may not have the level of clearance about the topic you're talking about. Secondly, even if they have the appropriate clearance, they need to have a need to know. So that's important. You have to have both things when you're talking classified information. Operational security is critical. And this, there's been leaks, so there's things that are water cooler talk, and people talk about me, or they talk about the Secretary, or they talk about this person, or the SEAC, or that person, other people, et cetera. Okay, that's water cooler talk. And that's going to happen. Large organizations, Pentagon, military, et cetera. But we do have to guard classified information. We have to guard it very, very closely. Leaks of classified information are matters of life and death. Not only is it matters of life and death for us in uniform, but the sources of that classified information oftentimes are human beings. It's not all signals intelligence. Sometimes there's human involved, and there's human beings out there who are collecting critical information. If that information is inadvertently let out, it appears in a newspaper, on TV, or a blog site, or something like that, foreign intelligence services, adversary foreign intelligence services can piece that together, and they can go right back to they can figure out the source or the method, and then they can compromise that. That has happened before with the United States. On the flip side, we have to balance that against transparency, because we do have a requirement to be transparent with the American people, and we want to ensure that we explain ourselves adequately and fully, because we're a very expensive organization, one of the most expensive organizations in the world, if not just the country. And the taxpayer is funding us to a great degree, and in order to justify the expenses that we are as a military, we need to be transparent, and the medium of doing that is the media. and things like this, a town hall, et cetera. But we have to always keep a balance there between classified information, official information, information that might be sensitive, and the transparency aspect. And it takes a high degree of thought to do that. And I'll let the Secretary talk further about it, but that's kind of my view on it. So thanks, Rosemary. Despite your allegiance to the Steelers, it's a great question.
Well, Rosemary is clearly a very intelligent person with superb judgment, and she knows the importance of this issue. And I'll just foot stop what the chairman just said. I mean, think about it in terms of the national defense strategy. If you're releasing classified or sensitive information, what you're doing is undermining line of effort number one in terms of impacting our lethality and the readiness of the force. In fact, I'll go so far as to say you're not only jeopardizing a mission, but you could be jeopardizing soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines who are on the front lines. That's number one. Number two is the leak of that type of information also jeopardizes our alliances and partnerships. It jeopardizes our foreign policy, our national security strategy, because leaks undermine those bonds. Countries come not to trust us. Allies doubt whether we can keep a secret or we could share something sensitive between us. So you got to think about it in those terms, and it really matters. We all know the phrases from World War II, right? Loose lips sink ships. That's true today as well. And maybe in some ways there's even much more at risk because we live in a world where it's not just where we're not just talking or on the phone, but we're on cyber. We have people are trying to compromise the integrity of our networks, of the internet, of our cyber capabilities. So we got to be very careful in what we say and do, and we have to avoid and certainly any type of release of classified information or secure information. But there's also information that is unclassified that can be sensitive as well, that again can undermine those things that I just spoke about. So I appreciate Rosemary's question.
We received the next question via Twitter from Paul Schrum in Raleigh, North Carolina. Paul notes he's not in the military, but wanted to know, quote, regarding the Bonhomme Richard fire, are you investigating the possible causes of the fire? Secretary Esper, would you care to comment on the tragic fire aboard the USS Bonhomme Richard?
Sure. It very much is a very tragic fire. I'm pleased to report that the fire is out. I've been in touch with the Secretary of the Navy, and I get reports from the CNO, the Chief of Naval Operations. So the fire is out. The CNO is out there today, and the Navy will be conducting an investigation, and that's the right thing to do, of what happened. But they're also going to conduct a survey of the ship and assess the damage. And then thirdly, I think they've done very smartly, is to reach out to the rest of the fleet and to speak to the commanders and make sure that the commanders have all the resources they need, that the sailors are trained, and that they are practiced in terms of firefighting. So we are proactive. They are proactive, trying to stay in front of things in case there's another, to avoid a fire on any other ship. So it's, firefighting on a ship is very dangerous. It's a very demanding thing. I recently traveled to Great Lakes where we train our sailors, our new sailors coming in, and very impressed by the training they do up there. It's live training in terms of putting out fires. It's that important to the safety and security, integrity of a ship and the crew that you know how to fight fires. And I really applaud the Navy's efforts to put the fire out, to begin an investigation, and then proactively reach out to the rest of the fleet and make sure that they are taking all precautionary measures until we can better understand what happened on the Bonhomme Richard to make sure we're preventing anything happening elsewhere.
We have another video message. This one is from Sergeant First Class Jonathan Fayette of the United States Army. Because of our time constraints here today and the fact we want to hear from many voices, Sergeant, I'll let you know that we cut your video slightly for length, but not for content. Let's roll the video.
My name is Jonathan Fayette. I'm the First Sergeant for Bravo Company, 47th Combat Support Hospital, and I'd like to tell my story. I'm from Nigeria originally. My family moved here when I was 5 years old. And I pretty much grew up in the Midwest, Michigan area. Kalamazoo is the city that I primarily grew up in. Ever since I was little, from watching the videos way back in the 80s of Be All You Can Be, and for commercials that the Army produced, I've always wanted to join the military. So I'm literally living my dream by being a first sergeant. I've had nothing but positive experiences since I joined the Army. Since I'm a 60-year whiskey by trade combat medic, I've been able to be in a myriad of units, whether it's light infantry to some special operations units as well. In doing that, I've had opportunities where I was the single only African American in an organization to one of two to multiple. And like I said, my experience has been positive. Going in some of those units, there's been soldiers who necessarily didn't work with personnel of my complexion growing up, and they had some biases and from their upbringing, but we all bleed the same color, and to this day, they're my lifelong friends. I was able to change their perspectives just by daily interactions with them and working with them, turning wrenches with them in the motor pool or ruck marches or doing PT, and now they're, like I said, my lifelong friend. I've also had experiences where I've been in cities where my family was concerned because historically those areas were not very receptive to people of my complexion and skin color as well. I was OCT and JRTC, and when I told my parents that I was going to JRTC, they were like, "You need to be careful because there's racist activity down there and things of that nature." But when I got there with my wife, who is Caucasian, and all my kids are mixed, I got down there and found that was not the case. You know, the people in that area were extremely receptive to us. We had no issues when we were on about around town, and we have friends that continue to contact us to this day and find out where we are in our military careers. And I think all of that is due to just the military culture as a whole, especially in the cities where the military is ingrained in that area, and they are patriotic Americans who just love the personnel that are in the military and what we do for our nation, and the fact that we chose to serve our country and we're defending the Constitution, and that we all chose to raise our right hand for the betterment of our country as a whole. So primarily, my experiences have been great, and I've seen that my junior soldiers are also having similar experiences. Some of them have not had as great experience as I have, but they see that what they're doing is for a purpose and for a just cause, which is allowing those personnel who feel differently to be able to voice their opinions without fear of reprisal from as they might find in other countries. If there's a question that I could ask, it would be in lines with the redaction of the DA photos for boards. Is there a possibility that the names could also be redacted because with a name, basically the gender and possibly race of that soldier would be prevalent to the board members? Is that something that's also being considered?
I'll turn this one over to the SEAC for comment.
First Sergeant, first of all, thank you. I got to spend 3 years and a couple of months in United States Africa Command, and I spent quite a bit of time in your former stomping grounds. And, you know, it's very fulfilling, and it's such a proud moment to hear somebody like you that didn't come into freedom appreciate exactly what the American way of life is all about. And I also like to point out that many people that are born into freedom sometimes take it for granted. So I appreciate you putting that into perspective on how you can compare two different systems and how you have been able to thrive on this. When it comes to the names and the possibility of redacting certain information, we'll pick the best person for the best duty. And I know that the Secretary and the Chairman both agree that we can do better when it comes to those boards. But also we want to make sure that once we implement a system, that is something that is going to benefit you, and that it's not going to hinder your opportunities for promotion. So I want to thank you for that, and I also want to thank you for the comment for highlighting that all blood runs red. And that is something that we can also not take for granted. And lastly, one thing that I will close with is that there are many parents right now that are concerned about the safety of their children, specifically black families. they have brought this up to us, that they have to talk to them about putting their hands up, make sure that if a cop approaches you, the way to act and everything else. But that is a product of the history that we have endured over many years. What we need to look at now is, as we're collecting our thoughts, is for the opportunity to create a different narrative to where families, regardless of color, race, creed, nationality, are able to step out of their front doors into free America and feel safe. So again, First Sergeant, thank you, and I look forward to crossing paths with you. You're definitely an impressive soldier.
Mr. Secretary, would you like to
Yeah,
weigh
I'd just
in?
like to add, I'd like to thank the First Sergeant for sharing what a great American story. It's just fantastic, and for him now to be serving in the United States military as a First Sergeant, over 20 years, and I assume at this point in time. So it's a great story, and he tells a great tale, and it is reassuring in so many ways. And I want him to know that we are trying to root these, practices out that might enable unconscious bias and things like that. So we are getting rid of the photos, and in fact, the directive I signed this week also tasks our personnel and readiness directorate, if you will, to go out and come back, I think, within 45 or 60 days and present a plan by which we could also strike references to names, references to gender, things like that that may trigger unconscious bias. So we're on that. We appreciate what that means, and the importance is to making sure that it's a merit-based system and solely a merit-based system.
Many of you didn't pose questions, but made comments, and yes, we read your comments too. Debbie Hoover, via Facebook, posted on our call for town hall questions. She wrote, quote, "What is wrong with you, DOD? Why are you discussing these problems in an open forum where all of our enemies can see all of the problems of the military? It's the same you having meetings on Zoom." I'll pose Debbie's question to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Sir, do you think we should be discussing our problems as a force in an open forum like this?
I mean, it depends on the problem. For most of the things we're discussing today, absolutely yes. We all militaries are a reflection of their society, and we are a democracy, a representative democracy where people have freedom of speech, and so on. And we, the Department of Defense, we're costing the taxpayer $700 billion, $800 billion, depending on the year, which is a lot of money. And we have a very, very important job for the American people, which is to protect the common good of the Constitution and the freedoms that people enjoy. And there has to be accountability. And so you have to be transparent with the good and the bad. And you have to do that. And we as a nation demand that. We demand accountability. We demand it through the Senate Armed Services Committee, the House Armed Services Committee. Sometimes those things are uncomfortable, but the Secretary and I and all the representatives, senior leaders of the military, we must appear, and we do so under oath, and we must be candid and honest, and that's fair. That's as it should be. Those are the people's representatives, and they must hold us accountable. That's part of the deal. The media, it's embedded in that document called the Constitution, a free media, and they have a right. It's not just some nefarious idea out there. It's a right to challenge us in the military or the Department of Defense or the government as a whole in order to hold us accountable. That's important. That's an important and healthy thing for a democracy. And yes, not everything's perfect on a day-to-day basis in the Department of Defense or anywhere else in the federal government, right? But we must be transparent with the American people within the bounds of classification. If we think for a minute that something is classified and it's going to, and the revelation of that information will do harm to a future operation or place the soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman at risk or place sources and methods at risk, then we don't talk about it. But that, relative to the whole, that type of information is relatively small compared to the whole. We get criticized frequently and a lot, but that is the nature of a democracy. So yes, Debbie, thanks for the question, but I do think that it's important, and that transparency is an indicator of strength, not of weakness. And if our enemies see that, then they're witnessing strength, not weakness.
Our next question comes to us from Senior Master Sergeant Rihanna Blake with the 366th Fighter Wing at Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho. She writes, quote, "In the current COVID-19 environment and considering most deployed location requirements to have inbound personnel quarantined for a 14-day period, has there been any discussion of adjusting RDDs, that's requirement drive developments, to reflect this requirement on the front end rather than having personnel that are slotted to redeploy on an automatic basis. Doing so would allow redeployers to head home more or less as scheduled while also accounting for any home station quarantine requirements, R&R, PCS orders, etc. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'll turn this one to the Secretary.
Sure. Well, I'll kind of answer the question more broadly first, and that is, we talked about it earlier. First and foremost, priority number one for me, going back to January, which is, I think, when we issued our first force protection measure in January, and since then we've issued 10, 11, 12 more, is protect our people. And protect our people means not just service members, but also family members and our DOD contractors and, of course, our DOD civilians. And by doing that, you can then take care of mission number two, priority number two, and that is make sure we maintain our mission readiness, our capabilities. And then, because that is our core mission, number one, protect the nation. And then, of course, number three is priority number three was the participate in the whole government response to COVID. But with regard to this particular issue, what we try to do is be very clear as either units move back and forth or people move back and forth, that in addition to testing and other measures that we are taking, that certainly if you are a unit, we want units before they deploy abroad to be tested and to have their ROMs, their quarantines, if you will, here on this side in the United States, so that once they hit the ground, they are ready immediately to begin their mission, whether it's a security mission, whether it's a partner operation, or some type of exercise. They're ready, and they don't have to wait 14 days. In many ways, that principle holds true for individuals that are PCSing back and forth. And as best as possible, all persons should go. I shouldn't say as best as possible. Let me be clear. All persons should do a 14-day ROM, either on this end or on the receiving end, depending on what you have to do in between there in terms of transportation. So that's what we're trying to get to. We want to make that system as efficient as possible. We are giving the services some room within their systems of moving people around to do it as efficiently as possible to address some of the issues being raised there. But the important thing is that we move people safely, that they do whatever testing or temperature checks as need be, and then on either one end or the other, they do that ROM so that they are not, if they are asymptomatic carriers or even symptomatic carriers, they are not presenting that into what would otherwise be a clean environment. So again, it's force protection, protecting our service members, our civilians, et cetera. And we'll raise these issues and take a look at any other way that we can either improve the policy or make it more efficient.
Today's last video submission comes from Operations Specialist First Class Pierre, who is stationed in Italy. Let's roll it.
With all the recent events that's been going on back in the States, I had to ask myself a simple question. What does my chain of command see in me when I take off this uniform? Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that. But what I am is unapologetically black. And with that comes a great responsibility to face challenges and adversities of preconceived notions and prejudices of how I'm supposed to act or what I'm supposed to do. It's sad to say, racism is alive and well around the world and not just back at the States. With my experience in the Navy, although it's been a great one, I ran into some people that only judge me by the color of my skin and not by the quality of my work. As a Navy, I feel that we should continue to treat people fairly based off their character and the sum of their actions. That's how we'll continue to be the world's greatest Navy.
I'll turn this one over to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs to comment on OS1 Pierre's message. Sir.
Well, Specialist Pierre, thanks. Those are powerful words. You asked what your chain of command would think when you take that uniform off. I can't speak for every officer and NCO out there, but you and I, you're a sailor 24/7. Whether you're wearing that uniform or not, I'm a soldier 24/7, all the time, every time, no matter what. And that you are unapologetically black, that's a good thing. You should never deny who you are, no matter who you are, no matter how you identify. And you should be proud of that. Be proud of being a sailor, be proud of being an African American, and all that's good. And remember, and this is for everyone, not just Pierre, but again, going back to the oath, going back to the idea that is America, the idea that every one of us is free and equal. Remember the words of Lincoln, that this is a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men, and I would add all women, are created equal, period, full stop. And that's what we're about. That's what that Constitution, that's what that idea is about. And we are all free and equal. It doesn't matter where we're from. It doesn't matter the color of our skin. We're going to be judged by the content of our character, not the color of our skin, like Martin Luther King said. That is what this country is about. That's the essence of America. And that is what we in uniform are dedicated to protect and defend. That's what the Constitution's all about. And we are willing to die for those principles, those values. And again, if we're willing to die for those principles, we ought to be willing to live for them every single day. So thanks, Specialist Pierre, for what you do and what you do every single day, whether you're wearing that uniform or not. Thanks for what you do and who you are.
Thank you. We have time for just a few closing comments, and I'll call on the SEAC first.
Thank you again, sir. And again, Chairman, Mr. Secretary, thank you again for this opportunity. One thing that I learned a long time ago is the Special Operations Force is truth number one, and that is that humans are more important than hardware. Well, guess what? We are those humans, and we need to treat each other with dignity and respect to make sure that we carry out that mission. For my shipmate, Pierre, I will tell you that those who judge what they don't know are nothing more than fools, so don't listen to them. You don't have to. You know your worth and you know your value. I know that. Lastly, I will leave you with two thoughts. That only the mediocre are always at their best, so we need to continue to improve. And lastly, that you deserve what you tolerate. So don't ignore things and don't walk past the issues. Deal with them head on and prevent them from happening ever again. Thank you for your time. I look forward for the next opportunity.
General?
Thanks. I just, at the risk of repeating myself over and over and over again, I would just ask that all of us in uniform never forget, hold the Constitution close to your heart. That's what we are about. And remember that diversity is a strength. It's not a weakness, it's a strength, and it gives us incredible strength in combat because it builds cohesive forces, it builds good order and discipline, and that's what we're about in order to defend that great idea that's embedded in the Constitution. So thanks so much for what each and every one of you are doing every single day. Thank you, Secretary.
Let me wrap up by saying thank you once again, everybody, for tuning in and to participating in this town hall today. I know we got a lot out of it, and I hope you have as well. Secondly, I'd like to thank all of you in uniform and also our DoD civilians for your service and your sacrifice and your commitment, particularly in these challenging times. It is a difficult moment for our country dealing with the coronavirus, but you all have inspired us and held the country safe and firm, both domestically and abroad. So thank you once again for that. Third, I'd like to repeat what we've all been saying, the importance of diversity and inclusion in our ranks. We must guarantee that we treat everybody with dignity and respect and ensure that we address issues of discrimination and bias and prejudice and afford everybody an equal opportunity to reach their best and be their best. That's my commitment. That's our commitment. That's got to be the chain of command's commitment. But inevitably, it's everybody's responsibility and commitment to continue to push along these themes. Because as we said today, diversity and inclusion make us stronger, not weaker. They make us better, not worse. They are all about what we are and who we are as Americans. That's why I want to finish up with where I began, and that is we have all sworn an oath to support and defend the Constitution. It is that document that embodies those ideas we talked about today, about judging people based on their merit, not on their skin or their ethnicity or their race. It's about treating people equally. It's about giving everybody equal opportunity. It's about respecting those rights embodied in that document. That's what we are all committed to. That's what we are all willing to die for. That's certainly something we all must be willing to live for. So I encourage you, urge you to think about day in and day out as you accomplish your missions, as you go about your tasks, as you serve side by side with people, fellow service members of all races, ethnicities, genders, orientations, etc. That this is what makes America great. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Chairman, SEAC. To our online viewers, on behalf of the Department of Defense, thank you for tuning in and thank you for your questions. That concludes our virtual town hall today, July 17th.